What's up, everybody? Eli Berkovitz here with Alec Courtier. I probably should have asked you how you pronounce your last name before we started this.
Here, you got it. It's good.
There you go. All right, I got it. Well, guys, as we both tweeted about an hour ago, we're going to be going through kind of our favorite edge rushers this week, and I think over the next couple of weeks we'll probably go through position by position of some of our favorite guys, and most importantly, guys that we think the Packers will actually draft, because that's kind of the main thing, right? Is that we fall in love with so many different draft prospects throughout the process, and then because of his RAS score or his height or his weight or his arm length, for some reason he's basically not a real option for the Packers. So we want to kind of weed that out for you guys so you know who to focus on. But before we get to that, Alec, how you doing? This is our first time kind of doing a show together. Looking forward to it. Obviously spent some time together at the Senior Bowl, which was cool. So how you been, the last few weeks and getting ready for the draft, all that?
It's been good. I'll just getting back into classes here. Otherwise, really just watching film ahead of the draft and kind of watching how the combine played out and seeing all that stuff too. But not a whole lot new other than that. Just spring break here for me.
Yeah, no, it's a good time, spring break, getting ready for the draft. Kind of a perfect combo. I feel like it's always that like month from the combine to the draft where you're just like, all right, can we just like get there already? Like we've done the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, combine, pro days already well underway. And I think most people are just like, all right, let's actually get to the draft, especially this year with it being in Green Bay. Alec, I think we talked about this, but you'll be down there in Green Bay, right?
Mm-hmm. The draft? I'll be in Green Bay the whole week. You're going there too, right?
Yeah, I'll be there. Anyone watching right now, if you're there, hit us up. I'm sure I know that I think Andy is doing like a pack-a-day get-together Wednesday night before the draft. And I'm sure Cheesehead TV is doing something. So there's plenty going on that week, obviously. But as I mentioned, we're going to go over the edge rushers today. It's a deep class. There's a lot of guys to get through. So I think we're just going to get started. And I don't know how to pronounce your name. I'm going to go with Tachyon potentially, maybe Stakion. Either way, he's starting with James Pierce Jr., a very interesting prospect from this edge rush group. So let's just start there. For a lot of people, he is edge 2 or 3 or 4, but I think most people have him in their top 5. And he's a very interesting prospect, someone that, if I'm being honest, I feel like it's not as likely that we draft him because of his size and some off-field concerns. But Alec, what's your opinion on James Pierce Jr.? And as you go through that, I'll just throw up some film of him so people can kind of get an idea of how he plays. But what are your thoughts on Pierce?
I'd agree that he doesn't really fit too much into the Packer type, but if we're talking about him as a player, quick off the edge, he showed it at the combine. He ran 4.7. And it kind of reminded me of like the combine Nolan Smith had out of Georgia. Now he's an Eagle. I see why he's most people edged for, but like, unless you're going to be using him in that Nolan Smith speed rush type role, I don't know how else he'd be effective because you're not going to get too much more than a speed rush out of him. But overall, very athletic freak type player. Could Goot take a shot on him? Maybe. But it's just this, like you said, the size. He has the speed and the athleticism, but the size is just kind of underwhelming.
Yeah, it's frustrating because, like, for me, even though, yes, you want your edge rushers to also be able to assist in the run game and set the edge and not get blown out of the play by a tackle going downfield in a running game, in a run play. But I also think that you need some variety in your pass rushers, right? You don't just want the same guy repeated, 1 through 4 in your edge rush group, where it's just big body, bull rushing, kind of using more power than speed and twitch. And again, is Pierce like, if I was removing from what the Packers generally do, I don't know if Pierce is the first guy I go to. I think I maybe go to Donovan Izaraku, who I think we'll jump into here next, he weighs a bit more than Pierce. I think he's closer to our size that we would potentially draft. Technically, I think he's a little bit lighter, but I don't know. The connection with Jeff Hafley is obviously there. I think that's what most people will point to. But for me, it's not even about that. It's just I think he's a great player. Seeing his tape was incredibly impressive. Seeing him at the Senior Bowl kind of solidified what I saw on tape of him being a very good player. And as I kind of go through that, let me throw his film up here. Some of these guys I'll have, shorter or longer clips, kind of just depending on what I can get my hands on. But Izaraku would be, for me, just a home run pick. I think he's a great pass rusher, has a very good pass rush bag, as you can see. Swim moves, bend. He's got the twitch. He's got it all. And I don't think he's a complete liability in the run game, as you can see here, tracing down this guy, forcing a fumble. Again, I'm not going to sit here and say he's run defense first, but I don't think it's a total mess. And I just think his pass rushing skills is of the best in this class. So I would be very happy about that pick. What are your thoughts on Izaraku?
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off what you said, adding someone who Hafley's kind of already familiar with, he'd be not necessarily the same system, but I mean, he's familiar with some of the schemes already that Hafley runs, so that would fit in very nice. But speaking outside of that, like you said, at the Senior Bowl, he was just solidifying what we saw the whole time. Like we talked about, I know you and I personally had talked about that ahead of the whole week, and it was just like, okay, let's see what these guys can do. And he was one of the guys that was just kind of consistency. He just had that consistency just over and over and over again. So
yeah, I mean, he's a fun player. Last year, just an example of, again, I think a lot of people look at his size and just assume he won't be a huge help in the run game. He had 42 stops last year, according to PFF. A stop is not a tackle for loss, but it's basically a play that is overall a negative for the offense. And he had 42 of those in, I think it was 10, 11 games. So it's really impressive. He would be someone that's really fun to see. But Alec, for you, who's kind of like your guy, unless we already he was Pierce or Izaraku, but who's like your guy right now at edge rusher?
Well, it's been since the Senior Bowl. Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. Will he fall to us? I don't know, but can't really get much better than that. There's a reason he withdrew from the week early down in Mobile. He had damn near one of the best weeks that you could have asked for, besides maybe Mike Green out of Marshall. So, I mean, when you're looking at him, you got SEC, all SEC third team his junior year, 5.5 tackles for loss, team high. And it's just the only question mark about him is his production. Through his whole college career, he only had 4.5 sacks, 1.5 a year. And that's the only thing that scares me is the production, but the Packers also it depends on the position, but they like to take shots on big athletic freaks. Well, he's 6'5", 267, and he ran a 4.59. So
he's a freak.
And then you add in his RAS score. You know how Goody loves his RAS scores. He had a 9.99 at the combine, and then at his pro day, he had a 10 out of 10, which was first out of, I think it was 1,804 edges since 1984. So you don't get much more athletic than that.
Yeah, so it's funny. We were kind of talking pre-show. You brought up Stewart, and he is someone that I've kind of gone back and forth on. I think I started this process. I'll be honest. When I first watched him, I don't even think I looked at his full stat sheet yet. I kind of just went to where I kind of get the film that I get and the games that were available for me to watch of him, and I watched. And I just watching him, I immediately tweeted, and I don't know, at this point it was probably, let's say, a month ago, I tweeted that this guy is the most Goody pick of anyone in this class. And that was before the lack of production and before the RAS score. It was just seeing the way he played. And then, let's be honest, right? There's a track record here of Goody basically not caring about production whatsoever. He cares about athletic profile, build, all that. Here is some Shamar Stewart film for you to look at as we talk about him. Incredibly explosive, no doubt about it. He's someone that at the Senior Bowl, I was very eager to see and just kind of be like, all right, how are people talking about this guy as a top 10 to 20 prospect when he has 1.5 sacks a year across, 3 seasons of college football? It's just most guys, if on your box score, you have 4.5 sacks across 37 games, no one is talking about you really at all, let alone as a first round top end kind of player. And yet that's what we're doing with Shamar Stewart. So I don't know. I'll be honest. If he's our pick, am I going to pull my hair out and lose my mind? No. But it's a little bit harder for me to justify it. I mean, it depends who's on the board, right? If let's say there's a big run and Izaraku's gone and Nick Skorton goes a little earlier than people thought, and James Pierce is gone and Michael Williams is gone and Mike Green is gone. Okay, like if they're set on getting an edge in the first round, and you end up taking maybe the most athletic edge in history of football, worse things can happen. But I do think at a certain point, the trauma and that feeling of the Rashawn Gary and Lucas Van Ness picks, it builds up eventually for Packer fans, where it's just like, why can't you just draft a guy who's shown he can do this already? So it's like, for me, of course, players, not every time, but you expect and you hope they get better in the NFL than they were in college. And the plan and the expectation is that you're not just going to be the same player you were in college in the NFL. You're going to get better. But it's like, I don't know, to go from 1.5 sacks to taking this guy in the first round, where if you're taking an edge rusher in the first round, you're expecting him to be sooner than later, at least, let's say, an 8+ sack guy a year, if not 10 or more. So that's just a big projection where it's like, you're going to go from a guy who played against college offensive tackles and only managed to get to the quarterback 4.5 times in 37 games. And now we want you to get to the quarterback 10 times in a season in the NFL. It's not impossible. He's an athletic freak. I wouldn't bet against him, but I am not as high on him as a lot of other people in this class. But we'll see. I do think he's probably going to go in the top 20. And I think it's going to be important wherever he ends up that he's just in the right coaching staff and in the right situation where he's not, maybe too much put on him right at the beginning. But moving on to our next guy, a guy who.
One more thing. I'll throw in one more thing. Just with the Shamar Stewart thing, I would also feel a little more confident if we took him, just because of that new hire we have on the D-line for the coach, Marcus Covington. He took Bryce Huff, 2.5 sacks. He came in. Bryce Huff had 10.
Yeah.
No, so I would feel a little better about it.
Yeah. No, I think they clearly are showing they have a lot of confidence in that hire, considering we're coming up to the draft and they've made 0 addition to the defensive line, whether it's tackle or edge in any way. And again, I don't think that's necessarily like the best process where it's like, okay, like this coach is going to all of a sudden make LVN an 8+ sack a year guy, and Igbare. Well, even though, I think Igbare is kind of just good as what he is, right? Like a 5, 6, 7 sack a year guy. You're not expecting him to be great, but he's also not a huge liability. I actually really like Igbare, but yeah, the hiring of Covington, it's not only big just because we need it to be big. Like, we need him to step in and make a difference, because clearly, I believe it was Rebrovich, the former coach, who was just not getting it done, who was more of just like a rah-rah guy and just hoped, like in like a movie where everyone just gets like excited in the locker room and just like punches the wall and makes plays. But I think this guy's going to get a little more technical, I'm hoping. But yeah, it's a big offseason for the defensive front in general. And leading to our next guy, maybe like, I think the mixture of someone that I really think will be on our board, pretty high on our board, fits just about all of our thresholds. And I just think he's a damn good player. Nick Skorton out of Texas A&M. So Shamar Stewart's teammate, actually. And one thing that I will say for both Skorton and Shamar Stewart and Shamar Turner at that rate, the defensive tackle, is that clearly Texas A&M, they were not asking any of these guys individually to do everything, because, Skorton went from having, I believe it was 15 sacks at Purdue to 5.5 at 6.5, at Texas A&M. So I think the roles they were not asked to do as much, but as you can see here on film, some of these clips will be at Purdue, some are at Texas A&M, so don't get confused by that. But he is just, to me, like, we take him at 23. I think some people, most mocks, honestly, I see him either right at the edge of the first round or top of the second round. For me, it's just like, I'm the kind of guy where if you really like a player, I don't care if you're reaching, quote unquote, of like 10 spots. Do I want to reach like a full round on a guy? Maybe not. But if it's like, we would be thrilled to draft Nick Skorton at 35, but I don't know about him at 23, like, that's not a big enough. Like, if you like the player, take the player. And for me, I really, really like Nick Skorton. 78 pressures over the last 2 years, just constantly making havoc, and also just phenomenal in the run game, especially if you ever see highlight reels of him. Maybe not a ton of what I just showed here, but he is one of the best at reading read option from the quarterback. Obviously, it's more important in college. Read option, I say, is more popular in college, but still, he is not getting fooled on read option plays. And as Packer fans, I think we all have some more PTSD involving read option and guys just totally missing it completely. That is not something you'll ever have to worry about with Skorton. So for me, again, if it's like Mike Green, that would be a dream. I don't think he gets to 23. Like Skorton, I think will be a 23. I think he fits our thresholds. So for me, Skorton is essentially my favorite Packer-specific edge in this class. What are your thoughts on Skorton?
Yeah, I will add in. You kind of hit it on the head what his play style is, but at Purdue he was also 20 pounds less, and
Yeah.
at Texas A&M they asked him to go inside, so he put on about 20 pounds. So that kind of took away a little bit of his speed. I'd like to see him drop maybe 10 pounds, maybe not the full 20.
So no, he dropped. He was playing at like 275-ish, I believe, at Texas A&M. He weighed in. I could confirm, but I believe he weighed in at like 255 or something. So he dropped weight before the combine, which was definitely
265 play weight.
Yeah, like I think that's a perfect weight for him. I think he was just too heavy at A&M. You could see he was kind of like burly, just not as explosive. So he weighed into the combine at 257. So let's say it's somewhere between let's say 255 and 260. Like I think that's a perfectly fine weight for him. I don't think you need every edge rusher to be 275 pounds. Like there's nothing wrong with a little bit of a leaner guy. So that's my thoughts on him. But yeah, sorry, what were you saying?
I'd agree with what you said. I think he's a very big Packer type fit. I also just let an edge rusher be an edge rusher. I know at A&M the way he fit in was just kind of working inside as well, but we don't really need that right now as much as we need help on the edge. We need someone to step in there and actually get stuff done. And having that inside experience will help if we really need it. But I mean, you have Carl Brooks, Wooden, Clark, Wyatt. Like those guys need to take a step up. And you have too much value along that D line for it to not be producing.
No, for sure. I mean, I think this is going to be a big year for Devontae Wyatt. I've kind of always been a fan of his. I just feel like we rotate so much where almost like I do think having a rotation is very important, keeping your guys fresh, but you also want guys to get into the rhythm of a game where it's not like you're playing 3 snaps and you're sitting for like 12 minutes and then you're playing 5 snaps. So I think Wyatt needs to be a little more featured as like Kenny Clark. I don't think Kenny Clark is like it's done, but let's be real. Last year was by far the worst year of his career since his rookie season, at least. And we always make the jokes, right, that Kenny Clark is still, 22 years old, right, because he's always been so young. But I believe he's 28 now. Like, he is aging. Again, I don't think it's over. Like, we see defensive tackles play into the 30s all the time. But I think Devontae Wyatt is going to be 29, yeah. So, but I think Devontae Wyatt needs to step up and be, like, the guy, right? Like, Kenny Clark has been the guy of the defensive line, both in pass rush and somewhat in the run game. Not as much in the run game, but for sure pass rush-wise, I think Wyatt needs to take that step and be that guy. And I'm actually confident he could be. Like, I was looking at Goody's 3 pass rush selections in the first round have been Gary, Wyatt, and LVN, right? And if we're being honest, like at least in the box sheet, right, in the stat sheet, it's not the best. I think there are redeeming qualities to those guys. I think Gary, like it happens to be last year down the stretch, Gary played very well. I mean, he finished the year, I think, with like 8.5, 9 sacks, but it wasn't like consistent, right? It was like he had a sack in the second quarter, but then like for the rest of the game, it was almost not really involved. So they just got to get better. Like Goody needs to hit, assuming this pick, for the sake of the show, right? Assuming this pick is an edge rusher, he needs to hit, or it's almost like, dude, what are you doing? Like you need at a certain point, you can't be 0 for 4. And I'm sorry, like Rashawn Gary was a 12 overall. I'm not saying he's a complete bust, but no, like Brian Burns went after him, and Brian Burns has clearly been a better NFL player than Rashawn Gary. LVN, could he get better? Sure, but let's be real. If it doesn't happen this year for Van Ness, that was an absolutely wasted pick. Like
it's now or never for Van Ness.
Like we can be like, oh, year 4 is going to be the year. Like year 3, like fine, 2 years. Guys take 2 years to develop all the time. That's not the worst thing ever. You're 3 years in. Could it happen? Sure, but I'm not holding my breath, and I'm also considering it a failed pick. Like you picked a guy 13th overall, and 4 years later, if he's not a good player, that's not a good pick. So that's kind of my little rant on the defensive front right now. But moving past Scorton, Alec, anyone else you got in mind who's behind Shamar Stewart? Maybe who do you got?
A little further down value wise, but Braden Swinson out of LSU. I really like what he's done.
Threw this on last. I was like, Alec seems like a Swinson guy. Let me throw this
you read
just
my mind,
in case. Just in case he brings it up.
You just got a very quick first step. We talked about the unpolished. This guy's got the moves. He's got different pass moves already. I like the way he uses his hands. His speed to power conversion, I mean, you can see it right here. He gets through really quickly and knows how to use his hands to get rid of the guard, like right there. Look at that.
No, he's got great hand movements. Sure.
And I think, just the way he tested out pretty good. I don't remember his exact RAS off the top of my head, but I know it was in Goody's range. I like a lot of Braden Swinson, and he's kind of a guy that, hey, you don't want to go edge in the first round, but you still want to get someone else that can contribute in that room. He'll be a little further down, probably late second, early third, I've seen. And a lot of people actually comp him to Ignigbari at the end of the day. I've been seeing a lot of people comping him there. And I'm like, if you can add someone who's at least that effective, that would help out a lot, especially if someone doesn't, like Van Ness, take that step this year that he needs to take. You need someone to if you're going to improve.
Yeah, Swinson is a really interesting prospect. As you saw in that clip there, he's not like the biggest, thickest guy, but like you said, he can really convert that speed to power very well. Good swim move, good arm over, all that stuff. He is, of anyone, at least so far that we've talked about, I guess outside of Shamar Stewart, he's probably the most threshold-wise. Like I think he basically checks every box that Goody looks for. And I don't know, Alec, if you specifically watch the show, but maybe some of the viewers here are NFL SE addicts, Trevor Sikkema and Connor Rogers, their show over at PFF. So they just had a mock draft show with Brett Coleman, and I believe his partner over there is EJ Snyder or something Snyder. I forgot his first name. But it was pretty interesting. They were doing a mock draft, and they were doing a what would they do mock, right? So not a predictive not a mock draft of what do we actually think is going to happen, but what would they do? And interestingly enough, they took Swinson for the Packers at 23rd overall, which I've never seen him in the first round. It was, I'll be honest, I don't remember their exact reasoning. It was that show didn't post till like 10 p.m., so it was kind of late, and I was all over the place. But yeah, I mean, Swinson, I just think I would be pretty surprised if he went 23rd, but in the second or third round, if they go corner or receiver, I mean, they're not going to go receiver in the first, obviously.
Right.
That makes more sense. But if they go corner or defensive tackle, let's say in the first, Swinson could be a solid day 2 option. A big fan of his. Another day 2 option I think they could be looking at and has been getting more steam, I think, over the last week or two is Princely Umanmielen out of Ole Miss, someone that we got to see at the Senior Bowl, made a big impact over there. Just a massive dude. Like, I remember when we were on the field interviewing players, the two guys that, like, still to this day, of course, everyone there is huge, right? I mean, these are NFL players or future NFL players, but Umanmielen and Shamar Stewart are the two that, like, I still remember standing in front of them, and like as I'm talking to them, thinking in my head, like, this is the largest person and like most built just person that I've ever stood in front of. And as you can see in this clip here, I mean, he's got a really good bag. He's got some good bend. He's got great power. He's got solid speed. He's not maybe specifically like a run game guy, but he's not a huge liability in the run game. I think he would be a really, really solid day 2 target for the Packers to look at. What are your thoughts on Umanmielen?
Well, I'll throw in, just like I've been throwing it to everyone else, and I know how much you love it, the RAS 854, right in our Goody range. But like you said, Known for the pass rush. His Ben's pretty good. As far as the run game, falls off a little bit compared to his pass rush, but that's just because his pass rush is that good. I don't
Yeah.
really see him as a liability in the run game for us. If you don't if you don't want to go edge in the first round, chances are he'll probably be there in the second round unless a surprise pick or a surprise jump happens. But these last two, I mean, would I be shocked if we take him at 23? Yeah. Is it impossible that Princely, especially out of those last two, will go at 23? No.
No, I mean we've seen crazier. I mean,
We've seen
Clelin
crazier.
Ferrell got
Seen
picked
crazier.
fourth overall, which
Mm-hmm.
that's like one pick that I always go back to when Mike, I think it was Mike Mayock's first year as the Raiders GM, and they drafted Clelin Ferrell at fourth overall. Oh my
Yep.
god, so funny. And like
Yep.
he was kind of very like, at least not saying the same player, but like I think Farrell was talked about as like a late first round, early second round guy, and he went fourth overall. It was just nuts. So Imam Malik going 23rd overall, crazier things have happened. The last 2 years, 17 and a half sacks, 26 tackles for loss. He's a productive guy. And that's the scary part, right? Is like, what if Goody sees like, oh no, he's actually been productive. I can't
Oh no, we
draft
got
this.
production.
Yeah, wait a minute. You had too many sacks in college. You might be too good already. Let me pass on you and draft a guy who had 3 sacks in college, but he might be good. I'm not even talking about Shamar Stewart in that one. It's just the more I just look at it, the more frustrated I become. Because it's just the complete like lack of care about production to me it's a little crazy. But
Like
yeah,
they've already
Iman
proven it.
Mayock, yeah, exactly. But another guy who, I mean, showed out at the combine at the edge rush group and just looked like an absolute freak was Landon Jackson. I mean, his vertical jump, his long jump, I mean, everything he was doing was off the charts. He's, I think, 6'6". I mean, just like a tall, not necessarily the thickest guy, but a super tall, long, rangy kind of guy, which the Packers generally like. They like the long arms, big frame, that kind of a player. And as you see here, I mean, this is only one game here against Alabama, but I believe he had 4 sacks in this game on Jalen Milroe. That is not an easy thing to do. He is also very, very good against the run, was PFF's third highest rated edge defender against the run in 2024. I believe he's had 6.5 sacks each of the past 2 seasons, so solid sack getter as well. Landon Jackson was, for me, at the Senior Bowl, like probably one of my top 5 guys. That like when I left the Senior Bowl, I was like, I got to go watch more of this guy. People got to talk more about this guy. I think he's going to be really good. I think he's probably a second round pick. And again, as we've been talking for the last few guys, if we don't go edge in the first round, Jackson would be a great target at 55.
Yeah. Kind of going off what you said with Jackson right there. When we left the Senior Bowl on that flight back to Wisconsin, the first guy that I watched film on when I got on the plane was him. Like there
There
was
you
a few plays in that Senior Bowl where I went, "Whoa!" Like who was that? And I like looked up and I'm like, Arkansas, and I went down. I'm like, okay. And then it was like he had his first sack, and I was like, okay. Then all of a sudden you see him get through and a tackle for loss. I'm like, okay, this guy's like actually showing up every play. Like
Yeah.
there was not many guys at the Senior Bowl that I left that had more of an effect on like I need to go watch more film
Yeah.
and deep dive into him than Landon Jackson. So I would be very happy if we snagged him if you don't want to go edge in the first round.
Yeah. Like that was exactly like my thought was just, admittedly, I obviously heard the name, but I didn't necessarily pay too much attention or spend too much time on Landon Jackson until, like you said, every other play at the Senior Bowl was like, okay, this guy from Arkansas continues to make plays. So he's a really fun player. But we have a few more we could probably get through here. Alec, for you, any other? I mean, I think at this point we've kind of hit all the first round guys. Like we said, I don't think Mike Green's going to be there. If he is, that's a home run pick. Doesn't have to say much about that. But I am curious about your thoughts about Micah Williams because he's someone that I see some people on Packers Twitter like, this guy's a top 10 player for me, top 15 player. If we get him, I'm thrilled. I'm jumping up and down. I got to be honest. I didn't feel that way. I don't think I would be like crying if he took him, but I definitely wouldn't be like steal of the draft. This is amazing. Here's
Right.
some of his film as you go through that. But what are your thoughts on Michael?
Yeah, no, I'm kind of in the same boat as you. I really didn't like buy into that hype. Yeah, he's a Georgia Bulldog, and we love our Bulldogs. Trust me. I mean, you've seen how many we've drafted. We even took Quay and Devontae in the same first round that one year. You know, at the end of the day, he kind of is. My biggest thing that I noticed was off the line. If you notice, he kind of does that little stutter.
Yeah.
He's a tick late. And in the NFL, in college, in that Georgia defense, you can be a tick late because you have how many other NFL ready guys on that defense with you. In the NFL, if you're a tick late, there's too many good tackles out there that'll jump on you and eat you alive for that.
No, you're already done. I mean, you're already out of the play in the NFL.
Right. See, and it's always like right there, that little hesitation. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but it's like a split second. It's very nitpicky, but in the NFL, you have to be nitpicky. So
No, but look, I mean, every single play here, he's doing that, and that is a great point. I'll be honest, I didn't even pick up on that, but you see in almost every single one of these clips, there is just a half a beat from when the snap goes to when he's really moving his feet, and that, that'll kill you in the NFL.
Right. And that was my biggest takeaway when I was going through his film because I saw these people buying into the hype, and I was like, okay. If I see people talking, I'm like, I at least got to go deep dive into this and see if it's really worth, like, okay, I'll buy into it. Or if I'm like, oh, there's something there that I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I mean, is it at the end of the world if you take him? No. Because that quick first step can be taught. But again, we've been talking. Do you want a project or do you want someone that's going to help you win now? And I think we need someone that has that production that's going to help us win now. It's just a matter of taking them now at this point.
See, that's, I think, also another big thing is that, like, when we took Gary, we were, I think it was what, 2018, 2019. We were not, we were still in like in a transition period from McCarthy to LaFleur. Rodgers was, again, it was like that was the year where like my down years or career years for other quarterbacks. So it wasn't like a bad year, but I don't think we were thinking. I mean, we always thought Super Bowl with Rodgers, but we had better years. We were not at the top of the league. We had the 12th pick for a reason. So when we took him, it wasn't as. And then when we took, LVN, I mean, you could argue we were pretty much in a Super Bowl window then, but it was kind of at the end of it, right? We took him in 2022, but like right now for Goody, it's like that's it. This is year 3 of Love. This is kind of like the trajectory of when this is the year we're supposed to be really, really competing for a title and drafting a guy where it's like from day one that this is a project, and at best he's sort of contributing as a rookie. Maybe he gets like 3 or 4 sacks, but really it's a project. Like, I just don't think that's what this team needs right now. Like, we have a lot of projects already, number one, and number two, like you said, we're trying to win a Super Bowl. Like Goody's talking about urgency and winning. Drafting a guy like Michael Williams for me is not the move you make when you're urgently trying to win a Super Bowl. It's more, we're trying to add pieces and build them and grow them and develop them over the next couple of years. Like, that being said, I don't think he's like a terrible player, but I would not be as excited as some other people would be about him at 23rd overall. And to be honest, the way the hype has been going around him, I don't even think he makes it to 23 at this point. So
no. And I will say, not to completely crap on him, I mean, he's got a good motor. Like, he is that tick late, but you'll never see him quitting on a play. I mean, he's tracking running backs and receivers down 5, 10, 15 yards downfield. It's just that tick late, that's going to eat you alive. And I don't know, like you were saying, we want to compete now. Good's been hammering all off season how it's time. Like, it's time to go. We know what we have. It's time to add those final pieces. Adding a project isn't really advancing you anywhere besides, okay, we're going to look 2 years down the line here and hopefully he's good then.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, for me, it's not a pick that I jump out of my seat and say, what are you doing? But it's just not something that I think is overly exciting or in line with, at least if he's being serious about urgently trying to win a Super Bowl. I don't know if that lines up with it, but a player that I do think could come out and pretty immediately be a contributor from day one. Maybe not the biggest sack getter ever, but JT Tuimoloau out of Ohio State is just like an ultra productive player. You'll see here, he's great against the run. He's also, I mean, a very, very solid pass rusher. He finished this year with 12.5 sacks. The 22 tackles for loss is a wild number. He's just a really good, like, he's just the kind of guy that I feel like if you want to go for floor, you want like a high floor player, maybe not the highest ceiling, but this guy is going to contribute and be a solid football player for you, I think that's what he is. Again, not the twitchiest, most explosive guy ever off the edge, but a motor, a good tackler, a disciplined player, sets the edge really well. Just someone that I think kind of does all the little things right, all the fundamentals right. And again, he doesn't have the ceiling of a Shamar Stewart or even a Uman Mielen or some of these other guys. But I think he's a very solid player that you could basically add to your defense day one. And I would feel confident that he's going to make some plays for you.
Well, and adding on to what you said, we talk about production. I mean, he had 12 and a half sacks, and you look at every key moment on that way to that championship for Ohio State. It's just he was there. He showed up. He made plays in the big moments. And honestly, he was a guy that could set the edge for you. I'm like, you're looking for someone right now that's going to help you. There's not many more people with that production that can say, oh, I won a championship. I was there in the big moments. I had 12 and a half sacks. There's not a whole lot more people that can say anything above that, at least in this edge class,
Yeah, and I do think it matters the playoff experience, right, and making plays in those big moments. Because at the end of the day, we're a team that expects to be in the playoffs, expects to be in those big moments, and I feel like the Packers have not had I feel like every truly elite team has that guy where you're up by 4 and there's a minute and a half left. And here comes TJ Watt for the strip sack fumble. Game's over, right? Boom. There you go. You just won the game. Rashawn Gary doesn't do that. And we haven't had anyone. We don't have a closer. We haven't had any real closer since Clay, Julius Peppers. It's been a decade since we've had a guy where it's go end this game right now, right? We're up. It's the end of the game. Make a play right now. Tuimoloau was the kind of guy who I actually feel like would be able to go out and make that play relatively early on in his career. So someone that I really like. But Alec, as we wrap up, any last names? I have one more that I had in mind, but any other you had in mind?
I mean, this one's kind of not so much a Packer type, but David Walker out of Central Arkansas. I'm going to throw that one out there.
Such a fun player.
Down at the Senior Bowl, that's when he really stood out to me. I was like, again, with Landon Jackson, same thing. I was like, I watched that game, especially on game day. I was like, all right, it's an all-star game. You can slack off here, but what guys are actually out there improving their stock? Who's winning these battles? These guys are going head-to-head all week. Who actually showed up when it was game day? And David Walker, there was 2 or 3 plays where he got through the line. And I was like, what the heck? Where's this guy coming from? I mean, I watched him the whole week, but all of a sudden it's boom, and there he is.
Yeah, so, he's someone that I'm trying to upload some of his film here now because I do think it'll be worth it for some of you guys to see it because he is over the last couple of weeks. So it was between him and Elijah Roberts for me. It wasn't the last guy I brought up. I only didn't go with Walker because, like you said, I just think measurement-wise, unfortunately, we're probably not going to draft him. Height, arm length, all that. But he is just I think I wrote about him a little bit ago, and I kind of wrote just a 10-stub ball of muscle, where it's this guy runs through your face. Whether you're a guard, a tackle, he's got the speed to power. He's got just the straight-up bull rush. So David Walker, again, I don't think he's going to be a Packer, but whoever drafts him, I think is going to get a really fun, productive player. And as this loads real quick, I was just looking up Princely Emmanuelin's stats. I would have to imagine this is his brother, right? Because it's not the most common name out there. There's a guy in college football right now named Prince Will Emmanuelin. So there's Princely Emmanuelin. If they're not related, that is the most insane coincidence that's ever happened.
There's no way they're not related
in human history. But here's David Walker real quick. Again, I don't think he's going to be a Packer, but just look at what he does here. This is against North Dakota State, which is a good program. He is just really fun. This quarterback, his life just got ruined.
The worst thing, he measured in just under 6'1" and around 263 at the combine. But everything besides the size. He tested out at an 8.53 RAS, and it's if he had just a little more size to him, I think he's a Packer. But if we're talking straight up about the edge class here and someone that I think could be a steal in the later rounds, he's 4th, 5th round projection.
Yeah. He's someone that, again, look, right, you play at Central Arkansas, you're not going to have the pedigree of a guy in the SEC, but I think Walker is a really fun player. Whoever gets him, I think is going to get a solid player. And as I mentioned, my last guy that I was back and forth with was Elijah Roberts, who for me is like shooting up my board personally. I think I overlooked him a little bit in the beginning, but I got a better chance over the last couple of weeks to really dive into some of his stuff, as you'll see here. I mean, look what he does there to that tackle. I mean, just absolutely shoves him back into the quarterback. And then here, using a great arm over, kind of a more of a speedier move. He's just, to me, again, another player who kind of does all the small things right. And you see it translate when he starts making the bigger plays as well. So 17 and a half sacks over the last 2 years, 24 tackles for loss. Just a player who has been productive. He fits just about all of our thresholds. I think he was a little bit light, but like RAS is fine, arm length is fine. I think those are bigger. So Elijah Roberts, again, I don't know. I mean, it wouldn't like totally shock me if he went at some point in the second round. Probably not, though. I think maybe if you went, defensive tackle, corner, the first 2 picks, and you got him in the third round. Like if we get Elijah Roberts in the third round, I'm going to be very, very excited about that. I would probably be even excited, honestly, if he took him in the second round, depending on what the first pick is. But I'm a huge, huge fan of Elijah Roberts. Have you had a chance to check him out yet?
I brushed up on his film a little bit. I haven't completely deep dove into him yet. But like you said, you mentioned the 17 sacks over the last 2 years. I mean, he had 4 forced fumbles. I think it was 93 or 94 tackles over the last 2 years. I mean, another guy, we're talking, there's production in this class. There is so much production to hit on. And I know, like I said, Shamar Stewart, high on him because we saw him at the Senior Bowl, saw what he could do, but it's the potential versus the production. There's a lot of guys here who are damn good, and they showed it in college versus, okay, maybe this guy can be good. These guys are already there, and he is another one of those guys where the production was like, okay. Even in these later rounds, you're looking at him, you're looking at David Walker, like I said, you're looking at Landon Jackson later. There's guys out there that can contribute that aren't day one guys.
For sure. I mean, we went through 12 guys here, or at least in terms of the guys we have film for. And other than Shamar Stewart, all of them were, at the very least, pretty productive, if not ultra productive in college. So unless the pick is literally Shamar Stewart, I do think we're going to get a departure from the no production thing because it doesn't exist. Anyone else other than Stewart that we would draft at 23 has legitimate college production, which I think is very exciting. Again, maybe they don't go to edge at 23 at all. I think they should. Of course, we'll see how the board falls. But overall, in what a lot of people consider like a weaker overall draft class, I think the edge group sticks out as one of the stronger overall positions. So of all the years the Packers need an edge, right, it's a pretty good year to have it. So I think really any of the guys we mentioned today, like I don't have anyone, like I would actually probably be a little more disappointed in the Micah Williams pick than Shamar Stewart. Like, I just think, like, if you're going to take a bet on a guy that, like, you're hoping, like, it's kind of a project or hoping gets better in the NFL, give me the guy with the huge ceiling in Shamar Stewart than Micah Williams, in my opinion. Other than that, like, there's no one on this list that I would be upset about that we drafted. Of course, not all 23, but whether it's 23, 55, 87, none of these guys I'm going to be like, I don't know why you would draft him. Like even David Walker is not our kind of size. I would be really excited if we got David Walker. I just think he's a good player, so I really don't care about those thresholds. But like as we kind of wrap up here, any final thoughts on this group? Any sleeper name that we didn't mention you want to quickly give some shout out to? Anything like that?
Well, I'll start off by saying just kind of what you were saying with the production. It's almost going to force us out of that little trend of going for potential over the production just because there's so many productive guys throughout this whole class. And it's regarded as a weaker draft class, I think partially due to the QBs being, further down.
QB and wide receiver not having those like blue chip guys, it brings the whole class down. But if you're looking at the other groups, I mean, running back, defensive tackle, tight end, edge, stacked. All of them are stacked. Corner, it's not a great class, but it's not a terrible class. It's really just the sexy positions, right? The quarterback, wide receiver is a little weaker.
And a lot of your needs, at least for us, we need edge. We need probably D-line help later on in the like 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, somewhere in there. So, I mean, it's benefiting us that this class is kind of deeper at those 2 spots just because there's so much production that can be taken. As far as one other guy that kind of just stood out, not only on the field down there, but like through our interview process. I mean, you and I both got to interview how many people down there. John Joyner, the edge out of Minnesota, great dude, really great dude. I enjoyed talking to him, getting to know him. But as well, he did make a few plays out there at the Senior Bowl, and I think he's an under the radar guy. I really do. I don't know necessarily if he's a Packer type, but I really think that you're getting a solid person, solid character type guy in him, whoever is able to take him.
Yeah, I mean, I think we always talk about the Packers, right? They want high character guys. They want guys who are going to be good in the locker room and off the field. And like you said, I don't think Joyner meets some of our thresholds, but just like as a dude and as a player, I really liked him. Like you said, I got the chance to also interview him, and one of the more personable, lively interviews that I had, where it just felt really natural, really comfortable. He's just a good dude. So wherever he ends up, yeah, I'm hoping. I hope it works out for him. Again, I don't know if he'll be with the Packers, but wherever he ends up, I think it'll be interesting to see. So, again, this isn't for anyone still hanging with us. We appreciate it. We're going to go, we got basically exactly a month to the draft. I think we're going to do these probably once a week. Maybe as we get closer, we'll do a little more. We're mostly going to hit the positions that we're really focused on. So we started with edge. Next week, we'll probably do like corner or wide receiver. But I think we'll hit corner, we'll hit wide receiver, we'll hit defensive tackle, and then we'll see where that leaves us before the draft. I'm sure we'll get a mock draft in here somewhere at some point. Yeah. But for anyone who is really into the draft, obviously following the Packers and wants this kind of content, keep following along. Obviously follow Alec, as you see there on Twitter, at Alec_332. Alec, you also have a pretty active Instagram and Facebook, or is that more just through the Packer page?
I mean, I'm pretty active on Facebook. It should be the same handle. As far as Instagram, it's just the Packer page, Packer Nation Today. So,
anything else you're working on? Anything you want people checking out as we head to the draft?
I will have a mock coming out here probably within the next couple days, and I'll make sure to post that out eventually. But I'm going through trying to do about one a week up until the draft, and then we'll see where that leaves us. So,
all right, that sounds good. So everyone, make sure to follow Alec. He's doing a lot of great Packers work across all social media, where as I really just stick to Twitter, I don't have the mental capacity for all the other apps. So make sure to follow Alec for all that at those other places. You can find me, of course, on Twitter at @BookofEli_NFL. Again, I wouldn't say there was like a schedule, right? Next week will probably be maybe Wednesday, Thursday night, same kind of idea, around 7 o'clock Lambeau time. But we'll both post it on Twitter, so you guys will get a heads up before we go live. But everyone who tuned in, watched, I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed. And we'll see you next week when we hit cornerback or someone else.
Sounds good.